Recently, the Arc browser has had a little bit of backlash after the company that builds it has announced they're not going to continue building new features. And there's a lot of negative reception on that, but today I don't want to talk about that. Instead, I want to just focus on what I think Arc did really, really well as a browser. And I think I can sum that up in one word: Omakase. Now, Omakase is a Japanese phrase, and it means something like, I'll leave it up to you. Basically, like chef's choice. Like you go to a restaurant and you trust the chef to be able to put a good dish together. So you don't order from the menu, you say, Omakase, and they'll bring you what the chef has chosen because they are the experts. And this translates to software really, really well. Uh, Jason Fried and David Heinemeier Hansen from Basecamp use this phrase a lot to describe how they build software. It's basically don't give the user too many options. Give them what they might actually need, but you're the ones with the experts as you're building software. So you make the good decisions and force users to use those good decisions. And Arc did this an awful lot. It was not littered with options for everything you wanted to do. People wanted options because as they were building the browser out, it was changing all over the place, and people might have wanted to keep the old behavior when something new got introduced, but overall, people really, really loved Arc. So give some examples of this. Arc had a sidebar and your tabs lived in the sidebar. You couldn't change it to be a top bar tab menu like Chrome or Firefox or most other browsers. It just wasn't a choice. It was sidebar or bust. Similarly, as well, it didn't have a new tab page. And it sounds really counterintuitive at first, but when you realize you don't have a new tab page, you don't end up with empty tabs littering your tab list. So when you make a new tab in Arc, unless you actually type in a URL that you want to go to or search for something and open a tab to that, you don't end up with an empty tab in your browser. Another thing as well is you couldn't just keep your browser tabs open all the time, which sounds so dumb, right? In Chrome or Firefox or Edge or Safari or any other browser, you open a tab, you expect it to stay there. In Arc, it would auto archive after a certain amount of time. So you could go back into your archive tabs and find it if you really needed to, but by default, it would go after a certain amount of time. And again, people hated this. There was a way to pin your tabs and keep them there forever, but it was a lot of extra effort. When you're just browsing around and maybe searching for stuff here and there, you probably don't want to keep all those tabs later down the line, but they realized that tab hoarding is a real problem, and so they built a solution for it by forcing tabs to be archived automatically. You could change the window a bit, so the default might have been something like archive after 24 hours. I think you can change it back to archive after 30 days at the latest, but really, if you've got a tab and you've not really used it for 30 days, you probably don't need it open. Maybe you wanted to pin it or bookmark it or something, but you probably don't need it open if you've not touched it in 30 days. And that solves a problem that so many people face, myself included. If I look at my Chrome windows, I still have tabs open from months and months ago. If I look at Arc, I've seldom got more than 10 tabs open unless I'm actively doing something. And Arc was really, really good at doing this. It made these decisions for you. You didn't have the choice. If you wanted to use Arc, you had to put up with this. And people liked it and stuck around. Maybe not enough people. Obviously, they decided to stop working on Arc and work on a new browser instead. But the people that liked Arc really, really liked it. The people that liked the decisions that the Arc team made were all in on all of those decisions after some time. And Arc as well did a really, really good job of integrating and pushing little features here and there that were really seamless and would be really useful, but wouldn't get in your way and you wouldn't even notice at first. And again, this is that kind of user experience design thing that you really need to come up with yourself and understand what you're trying to solve to be able to implement. And Arc did this a lot with AI features as well. They had a period where they introduced something called Arc Max, which was 5 or 6 different AI related features built into the browser. And this was one thing you could turn on and off individually, but out of the box, you might not notice anything. So I think one of my favorite ones is if you hit Control F or Command F to get a little search panel up and search on the page, you type something in and that works like normal. But if you type something in that gets 0 results on the page, it would instead prompt to be like a ask AI thing, and it would give that AI the context of the current page. So you could still, without even learning any new hotkeys, you could use something to search on the page or ask something on the page. And it was so seamless. They really nailed the design on that kind of thing. And you got to admit, they tried on some other things as well, and they didn't necessarily work out as well. So, one thing, for example, they automatically change tab titles to try and tidy them up. But then after they're tidy, they don't really update. So, any dynamically changing meta title on a page doesn't really update, and you might lose context of what that tab is. Same for downloads. They try to automatically rename files that you download through the browser into something that makes a little bit more sense and is more human readable, which is fine, but it often misses the mark because download pages don't usually have a lot of context about what you're actually downloading. But they tried to make these things seamless, and because they realized that they might not be completely seamless, you could turn them off. So Arc did really well at what it did because they took this Omakase approach and mentality to everything they were building. And they just continued working on it. Fine, not a problem. Along comes another browser who thinks they can pick up where Arc has left off and make it better. And I won't say it's 100% the same. It's not 100% a clone of Arc, but Zen browser is an open source browser. It's based on Firefox instead of Chrome. And if you install it out of the box, you think it probably looks exactly like Arc. And that's by design. They are trying to copy Arc and Arc's features and Arc's design and trying to get users that are going to move away from Arc because it's not having new features to move to Zen browser. The problem is copying doesn't always come across the best. And I don't mean that as in there's bad intentions with copying. They are trying to fill a gap in the market that is obviously there because people like this kind of browser. But Zen offers way too many choices. You go to Zen, you get greeted with a settings panel with hundreds and hundreds of options, whereas Arc only had like 24 exposed to you at most. And of course, power users are going to want to, configure their tabs to be on the top or set tabs to not auto archive and stuff like that. And Zen gives you the choice to do that. But it takes away that feeling of cohesiveness of a well-designed product. Things are janky here and there, and in ways that you might not expect as well. Because if you have an Omakase bit of software, you know the defaults. Everything is basically default. You have one piece of software that you build. If you have options for every little thing that you can do, well, suddenly you got to think about what happens if that option is checked and that option isn't checked, but that third option is also checked. And what about any other permutation of those? And then you change that over 300 different things, and it gets a little bit awkward. So, for example, I think they've fixed it now, but a few months ago in Zen browser, you could set your sidebar to be either on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. That's absolutely fine. But when you hover over a tab in that sidebar, the pop-up would always come up over the right-hand side of the tab. So the default being on the left-hand side obviously would always bleed into the actual page that you're viewing because it's going towards the middle of the screen. But on the right-hand side, it's going kind of off the screen or obscuring something and you're not really able to see what you want to see. And that's just one dumb example. And again, I think that was fixed. But you got to think about all of these edge cases of different options coming together. You got to think about your users going through all these options and thinking about what combination they want, making sure they don't get overloaded with too many choices. And it makes everything a little bit harder. But you go Omakase, you got one thing, you know it looks beautiful, you know it works beautifully. It's easy to test, easy to build. It's perfect. So yeah, when you're building software, try building it Omakase.